From the day of our founding, we have proclaimed that every man and woman on this earth has rights and dignity and matchless value because they bear the image of the Maker of heaven and earth. So it is the policy of the United States to seek and support the growth of democratic movements and institutions in every nation and culture with the ultimate goal of ending tyranny in our world. The great objective of ending tyranny is the concentrated work of generations. The difficulty of the task is no excuse for avoiding it. We will persistently clarify the choice before every ruler in every nation. The moral choice between oppression, which is always wrong, and freedom, which is eternally right. Eventually, the call of freedom comes to every mind and every soul. We do not accept the existence of permanent tyranny because we do not accept the possibility of permanent slavery. Liberty will come to those who love it.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the President and CEO of the George W. Bush Presidential Center, Ken Hersh.
Good morning, and welcome to the 2024 Forum on Leadership. Thank you all for attending, and special thanks to President and Mrs. Bush for their guidance and their inspiration, and thanks to so many here who've supported us and invested in our work. We value your partnership, and we aim to make you proud. Today, it is very easy to be pessimistic. In a recent poll, 76% of Americans reported thinking that the country was headed in the wrong direction. And many are distraught over a presidential election that more than two-thirds say they don't want. For the first time in a long time, the parties are both running on maximizing grievance versus presenting real solutions. Despite all the benefits we have, we are not a confident bunch right now. And it's casting a cloud over our role in the world. Many now argue to a domestic voting audience that in the U.S., with our overstretched balance sheet and our spotty track record, we can no longer be the world's policeman. But playing the role of the global cop, I think, is the wrong analogy. A far better analogy for the U.S., and the one it already plays, is that of a player-coach. America is asked both to lead and to play the game of freedom, democracy, and capitalism at the same time. We boast the world's largest economy, representing 25% of global GDP, and we lead the world in innovation. We possess the world's largest military with a presence in over 80 countries. We manage the world's reserve currency and its financial infrastructure. And if you don't think the U.S. is needed on the field, simply ask those who rely on us for so many things, or those around the world who are trying to get into this country to flee their corrupt or authoritarian leaders. I'd like to grab this country by the shoulders and shake it to get us out of the funk. We should be confident. We should embrace our role, exhibit global stage presence, and exhibit a leadership style fitting of today's challenges. Why? Because we have no real choice. And if not us, who? We are in a critical period in our history. How we react to three major factors at play today in the next 2 or 3 years will determine the fate of the next 50. First, we are amidst a global decoupling as we move from a world of a single superpower to a multipolar world with and complicated by a new axis of evil consisting of Russia, Iran, North Korea, Syria, and a complicit China, all of which will impact economic growth, politics, and geopolitics. Second, we need to figure out our relationship with rapidly changing technology that has both enormous benefits and risks. Established institutions will need to evolve, and we need to lead that evolution, or in fact, we will leave it to others. And remember, if you're not at the table, you're likely on the menu. Third, we're seeing a rise of populism at home and around the world, with its ugly isolationism, protectionism, and nativism. Despite the fact that empirical evidence has time and again proven them wrong, these dangerous tendencies never seem to go away. As David French, one of our panelists today, wrote in the New York Times last fall, evolution is a concept that applies to biology, not human nature. It turns out that humanity does not grow out of the darkness of the past. It has to be contested in every generation. Or, as George Bernard Shaw said more simply, we learn from experience that men never learn from experience. In this country, the rise of populism has come at a time of enormous political dysfunction, giving it breathing room and power, as the forces of moderation are too divided to mount a stirring defense, and thus our divisions are getting reinforced. I was disturbed by a poll out last fall by UVA's Center for Politics that found that 38% of Joe Biden supporters and 41% of Donald Trump supporters said that the opposite parties' views were so dangerous that it was acceptable to use violence to stop them from achieving their goals. This is not a phenomenon of just one side of the aisle. And I maintain that you can't say you love this country and hate half of it at the same time. This is why I call it a two-front war. We are both at war with ourselves at home and our adversaries abroad, a completely untenable situation. We cannot tend to the geopolitical fires abroad when our own house is ablaze. Ian Bremmer and Jared Cohen wrote recently about why this dysfunction at home hurts the world. They said a country that struggles to manage its domestic challenges will struggle to persuade others to view it as an example, let alone entrust it with the responsibilities of upholding and revitalizing international order. In short, as player-coach, we cannot win if this continues. President Bush puts it much more succinctly, of course, when he says, 9/11 taught us that what happens over there matters here. Now, I would add that what happens here matters over there. Supporting others abroad confronts extremism that could ultimately threaten our shores. If we retreat from the world stage, we will be less secure here at home. We need to know that we're a great country, capable of great things, and have led the greatest peacetime advance in quality of life and longevity in the history of mankind. At the same time, we must also realize that we don't always get it right. However, just because we don't always get it right doesn't mean that we give up. We are not quitters. Our dynamic economy is built on risk-taking and overcoming failures and learning from it. As a country, we must have the same confidence and not retreat because the stakes are simply too high. We must remember, as Ronald Reagan warned, that freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it on to our children in the bloodstream. It must be fought for, protected, and handed on for them to do the same. In both Ukraine and Israel today, we are seeing how important it is to support freedom fighters globally. Who knows how less aggressive Russia, Hamas, and Iran would have been had we not abandoned our Afghanistan mission so weakly and had we remained firmly behind our allies. It is understandable that our waffling empowers Russia and Iran. If we want peace, we must be strong. Our leadership should be charged with strengthening our freedoms, not increasing the risk of losing them. At the Bush Center, we are unapologetic globalists who feel it is critical that we support freedom and opportunity around the world. And today that means remaining steadfast in our commitment to both Ukraine and Israel. Perhaps by hearing stories from abroad, we will appreciate what we have here at home and use this message to motivate each of us to be a force for action. That's why we've come together here today to discuss the call of freedom. This morning, we will hear voices of freedom, we will explore the role of human rights in the new global order, and we will discuss how religious liberties are on the front lines of this battle for personal freedom. We'll hear from inspirational participants in our programs, as well as from Indra Nooyi, our 2024 recipient of the George W. Bush Presidential Medal for Distinguished Leadership. And at lunch, Bill Burns, the director of the CIA, will discuss navigating global conflicts. After lunch, we've set up a war room in the museum to hear from two experts on Ukraine and Israel, two flashpoints where the great power conflicts are being played out in real time. Don't miss that as you exit. These are critical topics that the U.S. doesn't have the luxury of shying away from, and we're not going to shy away from them here at the Bush Center. So thank you all for being here. Thank you, President and Mrs. Bush, for your inspiration and your guidance. And to kick us off now, it is my honor to introduce Jennifer Chandler, the president of Bank of America Dallas and the head of philanthropic solutions for the entire Bank of America. B of A has been a generous partner and investor in our work, and we value them in our pursuit of freedom, opportunity, accountability, and compassion. Please join me in welcoming Jennifer Chandler.
Good morning. It's my pleasure and honor to introduce this first panel, Voices of Freedom. And this is not just a discussion or a dialogue. It's a true testament to the human values and the values of the Bush Institute: freedom, opportunity, accountability, and compassion. In the face of persecution and political intimidation, special people rise to the occasion and use their voice to stand up for what's right. It's even more impressive because they're often doing this alone. Their stories are not just stories of personal triumph, but they're incredible examples of what one voice can do in the pursuit of freedom. Today, we're privileged to hear from people that have really embodied the courage and the determination needed. They've pushed the status quo, and they've spoken for truth. I'm particularly excited to hear the discussion today because we know through the Institute, hearing these stories, supporting their work, helps us all create change. And they've flown across the world for us to hear their stories. I'm so pleased to introduce Pashtana Durrani, founder and executive director, Learn Afghanistan. Joseph Kim, program manager, global policy and expert in resident, George W. Bush Institute. Alice Zhuravel, Ukrainian social entrepreneur and innovator. And our moderator, Natalie, Gonnella-Platts, Director Global Policy of the George W. Bush Institute. You are in for a treat. I've had the pleasure to visit with them, and again, they've traveled across the globe to tell this incredible story of how they've used their voice. So please join me in welcoming this panel as we amplify their voices of freedom.
Wonderful. Good morning. Well, Jennifer did such a tremendous job in framing the conversation. I have only a little bit to add, and we're going to hear from an incredible array of speakers today. The itinerary really is just amazing. So I actually want to focus on the timing of this discussion. It is not by coincidence or scheduling availability that we have positioned this discussion among advocates to kick us off. It is really reflective of the incredible asset that Pashtana, Joseph, and Alice represent, and so many like them represent, in terms of advancing free and fair societies around the world. They represent the core values we have here at the Bush Institute. And so as you think of all the big ideas, the incredible leaders, the critical questions that are projected across all of the panels today, I have two calls to action to all of you. The first is to remember the perspectives and lived experience that are shared right now across all of those discussions and all of those that you have beyond today. The second is to think about, what is your call to action? How can you answer the call to freedom to support these tremendous and courageous individuals and so many like them who are advancing peace and prosperity every day in unbelievable circumstances of adversity? So with that, I want to turn to our panelists, and Joseph would be the very first to say ladies first. So of course I'm going to put him on the spot because he's wildly outnumbered right now. But too often, the issue of human rights and national security are disconnected in foreign policy priorities. And that is a disservice because they're intrinsically linked. And the North Korean example is a really important projection of that. And so from your perspective, can you explain why and why you cannot de-link human rights from security priorities?
Thank you, Natalie. It's great to be outnumbered.
Always.
I have not only studied different forms of governance, but I have also grown up both in a dictatorship and in a democracy. And I believe that it is impossible to achieve credible and sustainable national security without respect for its citizens' human rights and dignity. What is the point of attaining security if it cannot provide its citizens with freedom, rights, and dignity, even if it is possible? Trust is essential to international peace and security, as social covenants and international treaties have little meaning without it. As a former Soviet dissident, Andrei Sakharov has said, "How can you expect a government that does not respect its citizens' right to expect the rights of its neighbors?" So when it comes to North Korea and its policy, I reject the premise that human rights and security are separate issues. The Bush Institute's senior fellow, Dr. Victor Cha, says that human rights and security are inextricably connected. For example, one way the North Korean regime finances its nuclear program weapons is by offering its citizens as forced labor overseas. Compromising human rights issues and prioritizing security objectives would signal to other bad actors that their behavior too is acceptable. Neglecting human rights abuse would also undermine the credibility and the legitimacy of a free nation. In that regard, I believe integrating human rights and security into grand strategy on North Korea is not a nice thing to do, but a must.
No, so many important points there, and I want to drill down further on these linkages, specifically looking at the right to education. And so, Pashtana, I want to come to you. The Taliban have not only restricted access to education for most female members of society, but they've actually used the education system as a strategic tool in the advancement of propaganda, power, and profit. And so from your experience, your perspective, both as an education advocate and as an Afghan, why does this matter and warrant much greater scrutiny from the global community?
Thank you so much, Natalie, for this question. And first of all, it's great to be back at home, because I think Texas almost reminds me of home in Afghanistan. I'm from Kandahar, go south. So going back to your question, I think the first thing we have to understand, people who bombed schools for 2 decades cannot be expected to open them. I mean, that's the reality of it. People who didn't have any strategic education, who didn't have any sort of grooming towards leadership politics, cannot be expected to lead a country. Go to Ministry of Education's website right now. You cannot find a framework for education for the boys. Forget girls, for the boys. So for me, I think I understand, but the world has forgotten that Taliban are people who fought guerrilla fight, and that's all they are. There's nothing else to them. They're not policymakers. They are not willing to make our country a country that is something that is livable for women. But also, most importantly, you have to understand that these people actively undermine the prosperity of Afghanistan. These are not the people who wanted to sort of have enemies in the government. No, for them, a girl who went to school was an enemy. A teacher who taught in school was an enemy. Anyone, the first decree, by the way, that they issued when we had a democratic country, the first thing that they issued was, anyone who works with nonprofits, anyone who works with any foreign government or is part of any NGO is someone that needs to A, stop. Second, if they don't stop, they're supposed to be beaten up. The third thing is they will be attacked or murdered if they don't stop. So these are the sort of people that you're dealing with, and that's the country in whose hands Afghanistan is left, and the women of Afghanistan. And most importantly, you have also to understand that women are reduced to be a reproductive system in my country right now. They cannot go out, they cannot sit in something like this. It's all illegal except breathing and except producing children. So for me, it's not just about educating Afghan women, it's our right to that land, because I own that land as much as any other person. So why is my role reduced just because 70,000 men think it's their right to reduce it, you know?
No, absolutely. And you brought up a number of really important points in just how these autocratic regimes, extremists, really lean into the exploitation of the people and the state, the fact that the intentional undermining of women and other opposition parties. But I want to come to Alice, because another chapter in the dictator's playbook is the use of division. And Putin and the Russians have made it very clear of their core objective to eliminate the Ukrainian identity and Ukraine itself. And they've used division in a lot of ways in their propaganda and the like to do so. What I find really interesting about the work that you're doing, though, is that you've very much leaned into what makes Ukraine diverse and haven't looked at the differences as a division, but actually as a unifying factor. And so I'd love for you to share more about what you're doing and why it matters and what it's meant to all those who are fighting against this oppressor in Ukraine.
Thank you so much, Natalie. And yes, I appreciate your words. I'm doing just, I don't know, this is just my responsibility as a Ukrainian. After Full-Scale Invasion, I decided to change my professional way from creative field. I never was in the humanitarian or social field to humanitarian field. And I started to work in the humanitarian field to be more effective for this crisis that happened in 2022 in February. From March, I was working in an international humanitarian organization, and this field, I understood a lot. I understand how I can be, again, effective, how I can be useful, and what I want to do next. And next, what I wanted to do is my social initiative about a lot of things of Ukraine, not about only diversity. It's actually about social cohesion. It's actually about just modern Ukrainian society. Why? Because I was stimulated, not inspired, but stimulated of crisis again and disinformation by Russia. Because Russian propaganda works perfect. That's what they really can do perfect. This is propaganda. And this propaganda about Nazism, neo-Nazism, racism in Ukraine, and so on. And I decided to be the voice who can just do minimal, just say that this is not like this. I wanted to fight propaganda, and I decided to amplify diverse Ukrainian voices in my social initiative to introduce this new generation of diverse, different Ukrainians of Slavic descent, non-Slavic descent, of African descent as me, Muslims, Asians, who live in Ukraine and feel like home to foreign audience. The second reason was, I think, lack of awareness about, again, modern Ukrainian society. Everything very connected. And lack of awareness, I mean that Ukraine was very long time close because of Soviet Union time, Russian Empire time. We was colonized, and we was close to, people, simple people, to do a network, to be, to have relationships with others, and not a lot of people from different countries, especially different continents, know about what really happening in Ukraine just in society, and I wanted to raise awareness about just modern Ukrainian society to foreigners. And also, this is my personal belief, faith as a biracial Ukrainian, to underline this possibility of our society. I think we are very potential, especially new generation which was born after Soviet Union fall, like me, in the independent country. And I think we have a lot of potential to have successful country, but after victory, of course, not just right now. So I decided to make my own experiment as a biracial Ukrainian. What if we trying to make our own unique diversity? This is not diversity in Ukraine. In Ukrainian context, diversity is different from American context. It's very essential to have to know. And I wanted to make experiment. What if we can use this as a social cohesion factor to make more sustainable and regenerative society in Ukraine?
Oh, it's tremendous. And I want to bring up something you mentioned too about the new generation. So everyone who is currently sitting to my left is 33 years of age or younger. So the future is safe in the hands of tremendous advocates like this. I want to just ask this next question. I know what you're going to say, but I want to make sure we state it. So there are a lot of apologists out there. There are a lot of those who are inching towards normalization of these regimes. So from your perspective, as an advocate and as an expert, do you think these regimes are capable of reform or change? Pashtana, first for you, the Taliban, Afghanistan.
I mean, as I said, you cannot expect them to change. And at the same time, these people don't have the understanding of Afghan people, because for them, Afghan people are reduced to, some things that they can control, and that's what they're doing. Afghans are not able to control. The one thing I think is fascinating about Afghanistan is read our history. We don't forgive people easily. We don't. So if you're not nice to our people, it doesn't matter if you're a monarchy, if you're someone who is important, if you're royalty, if you're a terrorist, you will not be forgiven. And you'll be punished for it. And I say it again and again for Afghanistan, the Taliban are in for a big surprise because they think they can control people with their 70,000 fighters. Afghanistan has been standing for 3,000 years, and they're like a new tale, which is like 40 years old. So I don't think, they change, and I don't think they have a plan to survive or sustain within this ancient nation of Afghanistan.
Joseph, your perspective on the Kim family in North Korea, capable of reform?
No is my short answer.
Please elaborate.
But ultimately, the fate of a nation is not up to one dictator. If history has taught us anything, it's that people cannot deny their desire for freedom forever. North Korea is no different. It will come to an end. Professor Arthur Brooks has said that hope and optimism are different. He says, optimism is the belief that things will turn out all right. Hope makes no such assumptions, but is a conviction that one can act to make things better in some ways. I'm not optimistic, but I'm hopeful that freedom and justice will prevail in North Korea as long as we remain steadfast in our convictions and take actions. To that end, I'm proud to say that the Bush Institute works to advance policies integrating human rights and national security, provide scholarships to North Korean refugees studying in the United States, provide leadership trainings to equip young North Korean escapees with knowledge and skills to become a new generation of leaders dedicated for the cause of freedom. So when it comes to North Korea and its people, I encourage you to choose hope and never give up, and to still David's quote. Never again must be never again.
Thank you. And Alice, your perspective on the Putin regime in Russia and its capability of reform.
No.
Anything you want to add? No pressure.
I'm sorry.
We could go with no.
Yes. No, of course no, because Putin's regime, absolutely not, because 20 years vertical, this totalitarian vertical that exists, this is something, I don't know, for modernity, this is something not, for me, I don't know how to say about it. It's like for European context, because different cultures can have different context, but for Europe, I'm like Eurocentric lady, I can say that I never think I was born in Kharkiv, like 40 kilometers, like one hour by car from Russia. And I never think about going to Russia, I've never been there, because better for me come to Poland, come to Germany and so on, to Europe, which is more far from my city, for example, but not Russia, because Russia was always for me very not flexible, very totalitarian, and let's say without proposal, civilization proposal, idea proposal, like what you guys, you want to occupy my city, for example, right now, but what you're going to do there, you don't have anything, academia, arts, nothing. Like, you have something which was appropriated from Ukraine and from Europe. Russian culture was appropriated. It's not unique. And for me, it's something like, but about Putin's regime can be changed, can be modernized. After Bucha, after like Hostomel, so on, it can be like nice. It can be, but maybe after Putin, maybe, yes, we had these changes before in the history. Maybe something changed with Russia, but I hope it will be not the same big empire with different territories, which was occupied again. I think it will be like a different country by territory as well.
So we'll call this the no but answer for all three of them. So leaning into hope and that but, right, and the role of the people. Joseph, what I love about you, and every time you talk about your experience in North Korea and your journey here to the United States, you always mention the impact of love and the inherent dignity and value that your parents celebrated and instilled in you. And I would love for you to share why this mattered so much to who you are today and the work you do as an advocate.
So I saw my father die of starvation when I was 12 years old. My sister, in that same year, my older sister was sold to a man in China. My mom was sent to a prison camp. So suddenly, I went from having a loving family to become essentially no one, orphan and homeless on the streets. I did everything I could do to stay alive as 12 years old. That includes begging food from strangers on the street, stealing food, working in coal mines. Before coming to America, I was always trying to survive another day. I never really had a chance to, and also didn't have a mental space to reflect and process all that happened. When I came to America, I had so many questions. Why me was one of them. To this day, I still don't know why that it was me that I got to leave, and probably I would never know. Another question was, how did I survive when other homeless children didn't make it? In retrospect, I think it's the knowledge that I was loved by my parents, my sister, because other explanations don't make sense. I was not the strongest. I was not the smartest. I say this because many homeless children that I met on the street were abandoned by their own parents. I don't know why I'm becoming so emotional. And they often said, even if I die today, no one will care and no one will notice. But for me, that was not the same. I knew that I deserved to live another day because if I didn't make it, I knew my sister would be very upset. And I say this message with great caution because it's not necessarily a hopeful message for children who did not have the fortune to grow up with loving parents. But one of my favorite sayings in English is, change is inevitable, but growth is optional. Everyone's definition of what growth is can be different, but I hope that all definitions of growth include caring for others. And when that happens, I think there is a hope for children who did not have the experience of growing up with loving parents. So to your question, I think I am who I am because of my parents, for their love, and I will always remain grateful.
Thank you for that, Joseph. Thank you for being so vulnerable. I know that was a tough question, and you can tell why every one of us here at the Bush Center counts it an honor to work alongside Joseph. And Pashtana, again, leaning into just your personal journey as an advocate, you are a testament to the power of education in changing hearts and minds in closed societies. You are from one of the most conservative provinces in Afghanistan. And so I would love for you to talk about the role of education in your lived experience and the success, not just as an individual, but the tremendous work you're doing to ensure girls in Afghanistan are able to access their right to an education.
I just, building on what Joseph had to say when it comes to parents. So we say it, we are like, Americans came to Afghanistan, and when they came to Afghanistan, my father was one of the people who fought against the Taliban with the Americans, and we had people who would come like Americans with big beards, and we would be like, okay, and then they would go to Afghanistan, and I grew up in a refugee camp, and I remember being, I think, 4 almost, and my father comes first time in 6 months after fighting the Taliban, and he comes and he looks at me, and he's like, you're gonna learn English. And when you grow up, you're going to talk to the Americans. And I'm like, okay, I get that, thank you. And I started going to school. Of course, I was in school, but I started going to English classes, and I started learning English. And of course, I learned most of my English from Gilmore Girls on Netflix. But he was happy. He was happy that I was learning something. So the reason I'm sharing the story is it's very personal to me. I grew up in refugee camp thinking that I had a country to go back to, and I went to a country that welcomed me, whose constitution and article said that I was equal to the men in Afghanistan, whose constitution's article said that I could access education until BA for free, and I was entitled to those rights, and that was in writing, and the people had testimony to that, and my father was part of it, and my family was part of it. And I took so much pride in that. Like, I would rub it in people's faces, and when I was in refugee camp, like, whatever. Like, us, we're important people. We have a constitution. We matter. So I grew up with that notion. And growing up, I had a lot of female women leaders in education, like Shabana, like Farishta, like Roya, to look up to, and I'm so grateful that I had those. Now, fast forward to coming from Maruf, Kandahar, where it was held hostage by the Taliban for 20 years because we gave 2,300 men to the war that was fought in Afghanistan, and they were all martyred. they were murdered, and their families were held hostage by the Taliban because they enlisted in military and police, and they believed in a better Afghanistan. And this is my tribe I'm talking about. So whenever I walk into places like these, I walk for all of them. I represent all of them because I believe if they were here, they would have done the same thing. So if we gave all these young men to be martyred just so our kids could go to school, and we gave all these sacrifices, it was enough for us to get to where we were until 2021. But now it's important, and it's up to us to fight it, not with arms, not with what the Taliban did, but in a way where we have longevity and sustainability. And for me, the hope, again, leaning into hope. For me, hope is, of course, I can say it all the time, oh, I'm doing an important work, but honestly, I'm living a pretty chill life, you know. I get to travel, I get to meet the President of the US, I get to meet Natalie, and I hang out with people. I was hanging out with veterans yesterday, so I have a pretty chill life. But then again, at the same time, I have teachers who are showing up in Kandahar right now in a basement, and they're teaching girls. I have 100 girls who are teaching, who are coming up to that school and who are learning biophysics, chemistry. We had our first batch of 30 girls who just graduated from grade 12, and this has happened for the first time in the past 2.5 years in Afghanistan. I have women who are showing up to school in a hospital basement in Helmand. Helmand and Kandahar, for those of you who know Afghanistan, South and conservative South, where it's very hard, even back in the day, to get educated. So if they can show up and get educated and teach girls, the least I could do is show up for them in spaces like these and make sure that that continues. So for me, it's important to make sure that I believe in that Afghanistan. My goal is 34 schools by the end of next year, and my goal is 3,400 women leaders in the next 10 years who are gonna do much, much more than I do, yeah.
You've come a long way from a 4-year-old starting her English classes to sitting on stage and just sharing the incredible work that you do. So I want to go back to what I said at the start of the conversation and the call to action, right? And so each of you have a very unique lived experience. You are incredibly tenacious, not just in terms of the causes you serve, but the broader goal of a more free and fair future for all. And so my question to you is twofold. One, what is your message to activists who don't yet know that they are activists amid this incredible network? And two, what is your specific call to action, whether it's time, talent, treasure, to our audience and everyone who will see this conversation via the live stream or in video format in the future? Alice, let's start with you.
My suggestions for advocates, activists, will be, I think it depends on context. If activists or advocates at risk, at physical risk, in Afghanistan, in the Middle East, somewhere in Africa, in Ukraine, you should to be very careful and organize safety environment for yourself. That's what I can say from my experience. As a displaced Ukrainian, it's absolutely also not practical suggestions like you have to be sure that you're not alone. That's loved ones, family members, relatives, friends, someone can support you when you feel really bad. Because this way can be like this, you can feel depressed, you can feel just mentally very, very bad, especially when you're at risk. And don't fear, don't be afraid of like to be maybe cancelled, even to be maybe criticized, because right now where our world's very changeable and a lot of different interests around, you can be criticized, you can be ashamed, you can be cancelled, so you can have this like bad impact from the society sometimes For example, I have like attacks from Russian people always, but you have to be very like confident, because if you do something from your heart for your homeland, for your people, you're always right. And be creative. Yes, be creative, innovative. You have to experiment. You have to like try to make coalitions, uncommon unexpected connections between fields and so on. And the second question, call to action, I think we have to be more aware about Ukraine, like about not just talent pool, it's knowledge and experience pool. Because right now, there are new generations face this war, face this public crisis, and you do the best to solve it, do the best to like find new approaches, new methodology to make life better for ourselves. But I think these cases, best cases, can be also work for beyond, like for other countries, which is in crisis, in public crisis, because we have it in the world. And yes, we can see Ukraine not just like crisis zone of the war. We can see Ukraine right now, which is like talent and knowledge and experience pool, like experimental field when something very meaningful and distinctive can happen.
No, I love that emphasis. 1 on self-care, 2 on the role of creativity, and 3 on how you replicate, right? The innovation.
Yes.
So fantastic. Joseph, same 2 questions to you. Your advice to advocates and your call to action for our audience and others.
So this is my observation, not backed by any scientific evidence. But as I get older, I realized that I became incredibly sophisticated with the language of probability, which is a great language to have if you're in business of managing risk. But I'm an activist. I need to believe in possibilities. And often, experts say North Korea is intractable problem, therefore it's hopeless. Yes, it is impossible issue when you look at it in the lens of language of probability, but it is not when you look at it in the eyes of possibilities. So I ask everyone to believe and choose invested in possibilities, not on probabilities. 2 is activism is, I am very grateful to be with the Bush Institute, where I don't have to worry. I can do the work that I care about deeply, but also get enough to live. That's not the case for other dissidents. Find a way to support them. It doesn't have to be Bush Center. Maybe I'm getting trouble for saying this, but support organizations that enable dissidents to do the great work, and that's, I guess, my ask.
Fantastic. And that includes our own scholarship program here at the Bush Institute, which is named in honor of our colleague, Lindsay Lloyd. And Joseph can tell you a lot more information about that. And Pashtana, to you to just close us out, your advice to advocates and your call to action for our audience.
Well, first of all, I think any young person, the first thing that you need to do is believe in yourself like a child, like when you were 8, 9. Also, it applies to grown-ups. Trust me. If you believe in yourself, you can make it happen. When I started working on Learn, people are like, are you crazy? Internet, electricity, devices in Afghanistan. We cannot get girls in school, in a physical school, and you want to teach them on tablets? And I was like, yes. And it worked. It worked. I have a 400 girls army today, and people don't, so I stand corrected. So believe in yourself delusionally. On social media, there is this thing called Delulu is the Selulu. It really is. Trust me, it really is. Just be Delulu about it, you know? But also, to more practical terms, if I have to start anything, and I advise it to any young person, do your homework, do your research, get around people who understand it, ask them questions. Like, literally just bother them, stalk them, ask them questions. And the second thing you need to do is talk to the people that you want to work with or the people that you want to serve, because activism is serving. It's service to the society, to the community, and you need to be in touch with the nerve of the community, which is the people of that community. So you need to do your homework, you need to talk to the people, you need to come up with a solution that is not just right in your head, but is acceptable and applicable to those people. That's something that any young person should do. Believe in yourself and do all of that homework before you do that. And then call to action would be, especially when it comes to Afghanistan, because why not? I think the most important thing right now is don't forget Afghanistan, but also when you're remembering Afghanistan, please don't enable corrupt people again. I beg of you guys, please stop bringing in drug lords and cartel leaders and thinking just because we're part of the Afghan government, they are important. No, they're not. They ruined the country. So make sure that people who have roots in the country, people who have people in the country, people who can call people out in the country are someone that you're investing in. The second thing would be support, share, and uplift organizations that are working on educating girls in Afghanistan. That is point blank the first issue that anyone should be tackling, from a security point of view, but also from a human rights point of view. And then also just read my book, it's a nice book.
So both Pashtana and Joseph have books, and Alice is actually working on hers. So as you can see, these advocates are tremendous. We're so honored to have them here. You all have your call to action. And one more thing I do want to mention, we are so grateful to be able to exhibit Relentless Courage, which is a photo exhibition largely produced by female photographers documenting the daily experiences of Ukrainians, many on the front lines. And so that will be accessible in the lounge, directly adjacent from the auditorium. And I hope you will take this opportunity today to get to know these folks and their work. Thank you so much.
Thank you.